Arthur Edwards just dropped something that has people doing a double take, and it's shaking up everything many thought they knew about Meghan Markle. This isn't just another opinion floating around online. It comes from a man who spent decades at the heart of royal moments, watching it all unfold up close. So when he speaks, people listen. And this time, the tone feels different. For years, the public story around Meghan Markle has been pulled in all kinds of directions, with headlines, interviews, and behind-the-scenes whispers shaping a picture that never quite felt complete. But now Arthur Edwards is stepping in with claims that seem to challenge that entire narrative, hinting that there's far more going on beneath the surface than anyone realized. What exactly did he reveal that's causing such a stir? And why are longtime royal watchers suddenly rethinking their stance after hearing his perspective? The details he shares don't just add a new layer. They flip certain assumptions on their head in a way that's hard to ignore. If you thought you had this story figured out, this might be the moment that changes everything you believed, because what's coming out now is raising eyebrows, sparking debates, and leaving people wondering what's actually true behind palace doors. That royal wedding everyone watched like a dream on TV might not be what people think at all. The big day between Meghan Markle and Prince Harry looked like a perfect fairy tale. But some are saying it leaned more toward a high-profile production than a heartfelt celebration. The moment itself felt different. Everything, from the grand entrance to the carefully timed camera shots, seemed almost too perfect, like it was designed for headlines rather than genuine emotion. Arthur Edwards, a longtime royal photographer who has seen it all up close, shared a version of events that paints a very different picture. According to him, once you step away from the polished broadcast, the atmosphere shifts quickly. Guests weren't relaxing in comfort. They were dealing with intense heat, layered in heavy formal outfits, trying to stay composed while clearly uncomfortable. It wasn't the calm, elegant setting people imagined. It was tense and overwhelming in ways viewers never picked up on. Then there's the seating situation. And this is where things get even more interesting. Instead of tradition leading the way, it reportedly seemed like influence and image took priority. Long-serving royal figures ended up pushed further back, while celebrity guests and industry connections were front and center. It almost felt like it was their moment to shine. That shift didn't go unnoticed, and it left many people questioning what really mattered that day. The media presence, usually such a huge part of royal events, also hit an unexpected wall. Prince Harry was said to be turning away from cameras at key moments, avoiding direct shots and making it difficult for photographers to do their job. Arthur Edwards even revealed he couldn't capture a single standout image, something that had never happened to him at any other royal wedding. That alone raised serious eyebrows. And when it comes to Meghan Markle, some claims suggest the focus of the event felt different than expected. Instead of coming across purely as a family union, it gave off the energy of a major public debut. The spotlight, the guest list, and the presentation all pointed to something bigger than just a ceremony. What looked magical on the surface starts to feel far more calculated when you hear these details. A moment that may have been crafted more for impact than authenticity. On the surface, everything about that royal wedding screamed perfection. Flags waving in sync, the choir hitting every note, and celebrities glowing under the spotlight. It looked like a modern love story unfolding in front of millions watching around the world. The visuals were flawless, the energy felt grand, and the whole event seemed like a once-in-a-lifetime moment. But behind that polished image, the experience involving Meghan Markle and Prince Harry. Inside, however, the story told a completely different version. For those who were actually there, the atmosphere wasn't magical at all. It was intense, draining, and honestly uncomfortable. Inside Windsor, guests were packed tightly together under harsh heat, sitting for hours with barely any relief. Heavy outfits didn't help either. Designer suits and dresses turned into traps, as people struggled to stay cool while the temperature kept rising. It wasn't about enjoying the moment anymore. It became about simply getting through it. You could see the strain if you looked closely. Fans being used non-stop, makeup starting to fade, and patience wearing thin as the heat pushed everyone to their limits. What was supposed to feel elegant started to look more like endurance, with guests quietly battling the conditions while cameras kept rolling. Even Arthur Edwards, who has covered countless royal events over the years, didn't hold back. He described it. He described it as the toughest event he had ever worked through. And that says a lot. This is someone who has been there for decades, capturing major royal milestones from King Charles III and Princess Diana to Prince William and Catherine, Princess of Wales. He has seen all kinds of conditions, from rain to wine to extreme heat. But according to him, this one stood out for the wrong reasons. It wasn't just about the weather. It was the feeling that guests' comfort wasn't a priority at all. Everything seemed focused on how it looked on screen rather than how it felt in real life. The camera showed smiles, glamour, and celebration, but off-camera, people were dealing with exhaustion and frustration. That joyful atmosphere didn't quite match what was actually happening inside. And just when it seemed like things couldn't get more uncomfortable, the seating situation made it worse. Longtime royal figures, people with years of dedication, were suddenly placed in less prominent spots, while others were given prime visibility. For many, it felt like status had shifted in a way that didn't sit right. What looked like a fairy tale from the outside started to feel very different once people heard what was really going on behind those doors. The seating alone had people seriously questioning the situation. Distinguished family members, military veterans, and senior royals, individuals who had spent years supporting the monarchy, were reportedly pushed aside into the back rows, as if they barely mattered. These weren't random guests. They were people with deep ties and long-standing roles. Yet somehow, they ended up with the least visibility. At the same time, a completely different group was front and center. Hollywood celebrities, some with little to no real connection to Meghan Markle or Prince Harry, were given prime spots, almost like it was their moment to shine. It shifted the entire tone of the event. Instead of feeling like a family-centered occasion, it started to look more like a spotlight-driven showcase where image took priority over history. Arthur Edwards even shared his own experience, and it says a lot. This is someone who has documented major royal moments that Arthur Edwards has documented for decades were unfolding. But even he joked that he practically needed a jeep just to figure out where he had been placed. His view was blocked, making it nearly impossible to do his job properly. For someone with that level of experience, being sidelined like that didn't go unnoticed. And it wasn't just him. Guests reportedly started whispering among themselves, confused by what they were seeing unfold. Some even described the entire experience as feeling more like a red carpet networking event than a traditional royal ceremony. The setting may have been Windsor Castle, but the energy felt completely different. The atmosphere gave off strong award show vibes, just dressed up in royal style. It raised a bigger question about what really mattered that day. Was it about honoring tradition and long-standing loyalty, or was it about status, visibility, and global attention? From what many observed, the balance didn't seem right. And just when guests hoped things might improve later on, that feeling didn't exactly disappear. A royal wedding is usually known for its grand experience, attention to detail, and making every guest feel valued. But here, expectations clash with reality in a way that left people talking. What should have felt like a respectful, historic moment started to come across very differently once these details began surfacing. When people think of a royal wedding, they imagine overflowing tables, top-tier cuisine, and champagne pouring non-stop. The kind of spread that makes headlines on its own. But at Meghan Markle and Prince Harry's big day, that expectation didn't exactly match reality. Instead of a grand banquet, guests were met with something much smaller in scale, more like an upscale cocktail reception than a full royal feast. The food situation quickly became a talking point. Instead of rich, filling dishes, attendees were offered. Bite-sized options were served, delicate canapés and small finger foods that looked stylish, but didn't necessarily satisfy. Picture guests dressed in extremely expensive outfits standing around with plates holding only a few small items. Pieces like avocado toast and macarons made an appearance, but the portions were so small that some attendees were left wanting more. Reactions began spreading quietly through the crowd. Some guests laughed it off as a modern twist, while others were far less impressed. There were whispers of confusion about how such a major event could feel so limited when it came to something as basic as food. Even Arthur Edwards didn't hold back, describing the servings in a way that suggested they didn't meet the usual royal standard. What stood out most was how intentional it all seemed. This wasn't just a planning slip. It felt like a deliberate choice to go for a sleek, minimalist style that would look good in photos and align with a modern image. Visually, it worked, but in reality, it left some guests still hungry and questioning the experience. Instead of the usual sense of abundance and generosity associated with royal celebrations, the atmosphere leaned more toward presentation over substance. Guests reportedly left still thinking about food, which says a lot considering the scale of the event. For many, it added to a bigger picture that had already been forming throughout the day. Between the heat, the seating arrangements, and now the limited refreshments, the atmosphere didn't quite match what people typically expect from such an occasion. It started to feel less like a traditional royal wedding, and more like a carefully managed public image moment. And just when it seemed like things couldn't feel more off, the dynamic with the press. The tension didn't stop at seating or food. It carried over into how the entire event was captured. Prince Harry reportedly went out of his way to avoid the cameras, shifting angles, turning his head, and even positioning himself to block clear shots. For photographers on duty, including Arthur Edwards, it quickly became a frustrating situation. These weren't random photographers either. They were seasoned professionals who had covered royal events for years. Used to capturing historic royal moments with precision, photographers found themselves in an unusually difficult position. Instead of smooth, iconic photo opportunities, they were left scrambling. Moments that would normally produce classic, polished images were suddenly hard to capture. Each time there was a chance for a strong shot, Prince Harry would look away or move just enough to disrupt the frame. It created a sense of chaos behind the lens that most viewers had no idea about. Arthur Edwards, who has photographed generations of royals, from King Charles III and Princess Diana to Prince William and Catherine, Princess of Wales, didn't hold back in his description. He admitted this was the first royal wedding where he couldn't secure a single standout image. That's a significant statement coming from someone with his level of experience, and it immediately raised questions about what was really going on. Some believe this wasn't random. The idea circulating was that Prince Harry's behavior reflected frustration with the British press, especially over how Meghan Markle had been portrayed in the past. Instead of playing along with tradition, he seemed to push back in a way that directly affected the media covering the event. The result was a day that should have highlighted unity and celebration, but instead carried an undercurrent of tension. Rather than fully embracing the moment, the focus appeared to shift toward subtle resistance and visible discomfort. It didn't align with what people typically expect from a royal figure during such a major occasion. Royal weddings are known for blending tradition, symbolism, and carefully planned presentation. They're meant to reflect continuity and respect for history. But here, parts of that structure seem to be replaced with a more modern, performance-driven approach that stood out immediately. From elements of the ceremony that felt more theatrical to stylistic choices that leaned heavily into a different cultural tone, the entire event sparked conversation. It wasn't just about what people saw, it was about how different it all felt compared to what came before. And that difference didn't go unnoticed. From start to finish, the whole event gave off a very different message than people expected. Instead of feeling rooted in royal tradition, everything seemed to lean toward making a statement, something bold, something attention-grabbing. The energy came across less as honoring the crown and more as presenting a new identity to the world. That shift didn't go unnoticed, especially by someone like Arthur Edwards, who has spent years observing how these moments usually unfold. He pointed out that the usual sense of continuity simply wasn't there. Royal weddings are known for their structure, symbolism, and the way they connect generations through shared tradition. But this time, many of those expectations, familiar elements felt reduced or replaced. In their place were choices that seemed designed to spark conversation and dominate headlines rather than quietly reinforce history. For guests who understood the deeper meaning behind royal ceremonies, that change reportedly hit hard. This wasn't like past unions that blended legacy with modern touches in a balanced way. Instead, it felt like a clear signal that things were moving in a completely new direction. The message came across strongly. A different approach, different priorities, and less focus on fitting into long-standing expectations. What should have felt like a unifying moment started to feel more like a bold separation, not in an official sense, but in atmosphere and tone. But in tone and presentation, The event carried an energy that suggested distance rather than connection, and that left people talking long after it ended. And once the cameras were gone and the excitement faded, that sense of distance didn't just disappear. Reports suggested that the gap between Meghan Markle, Prince Harry, and the rest of the royal circle only grew wider over time. Invitations and opportunities to stay connected became less frequent, and when they did come up, they weren't always accepted. Choices around privacy and independence started to shape how they interacted with royal life. Moving forward, instead of fully engaging in shared spaces, there was a clear preference for maintaining control over their environment and routines. That shift naturally impacted how often family members could spend time together. For older relatives, especially, that change was deeply felt. Time with younger generations became limited, and moments that might once have been routine turned into rare occasions. From the outside, it painted a picture of increasing distance, not just physically but emotionally as well. What began as a wedding full of global attention slowly turned into a story about separation, leaving many to wonder how things shifted so far, so fast. Arthur Edwards didn't hide how he felt about the aftermath. He called it heartbreaking. In his view, it wasn't just about distance between adults. It was about a whole generation missing out. Young royals growing up without shared traditions, family moments, and the bonds that once defined what the royal circle stood for. That absence carried weight, especially in a family built so heavily on legacy and connection. What made the situation stand out even more to critics was the contrast in messaging. Meghan Markle and Prince Harry often spoke publicly about compassion, unity, and the importance of family. Yet at the same time, their actions seemed to create more distance. To some observers, that gap between words and reality raised serious questions. It didn't look like simple privacy. It looked like a firm boundary that kept the royal side at arm's length. While their personal story continued to be shared on a global stage, the wedding, which many expected to bring people closer, started to be seen in a completely different light. Instead of strengthening ties, it appeared to mark the beginning of a deeper divide. Small moments added up: missed interactions, declined invitations, and limited contact, each one making reconciliation feel further out of reach. What began as a glamorous global event slowly turned into something far more complicated. And then came the interview that took everything to another level. When Meghan Markle and Prince Harry sat down with Oprah Winfrey, it wasn't a quiet or subtle moment. It was explosive in how much attention it grabbed. They spoke openly about their experiences, sharing claims about how they were treated and how things unfolded behind the scenes. The conversation quickly dominated headlines and sparked intense reactions from every direction. From Arthur Edwards' perspective, this wasn't just a candid discussion. It was seen as a calculated move that kept the spotlight exactly where it was intended. Instead of opening a balanced dialogue, it came across to him as one-sided, with strong claims being made while others involved remained publicly silent. That moment didn't just extend the story, it intensified it. What had already been a growing distance now felt like a full divide playing out in front of the entire world. The combination of public statements, media appearances, and ongoing tension turned the situation into something far bigger than a private family issue. And for many watching, it raised one big question. Was this ever going to be resolved, or had things already gone too far? Arthur Edwards didn't hold back when talking about the long-term impact. He described it as genuinely heartbreaking. From his perspective, this wasn't just tension between adults. It meant younger members of the royal circle were missing out on shared traditions, cousin connections, and the kind of family bonds that had shaped the monarchy for generations. That absence wasn't small. It changed the entire dynamic of what that legacy is supposed to look like. What really stood out to critics was the contrast between what was said publicly and what seemed to be happening behind the scenes. Meghan Markle and Prince Harry often spoke about compassion, unity, and protecting family, but at the same time, their choices appeared to create more distance from their own relatives. To some observers, privacy didn't come across as simple protection. It looked more like a barrier that kept the royal family out while their personal narrative remained very much in the public eye. The wedding itself, which many thought would bring people closer, started to look like the beginning of a deeper split. Small moments built up over time, missed chances to reconnect, limited interaction, and ongoing tension, each one making things harder to repair. What started as a global celebration slowly turned into a story filled with separation and unresolved conflict. Then came the interview that completely shifted the tone. When Meghan Markle and Prince Harry sat down with Oprah Winfrey, it wasn't just another appearance. It became one of the most talked about moments in recent royal history. They shared their experiences openly, including serious claims about how they were treated, which immediately sparked intense global debate. From Arthur Edwards' point of view, this wasn't a balanced exchange. He saw it as a carefully timed move that kept attention exactly where it needed to be. Critics argued that the timing raised questions, especially as public interest seemed to be shifting. Suddenly, a major interview brought everything back into focus in a big way. Millions tuned in expecting clarity and honesty, but reactions afterward were deeply divided. Some believe the interview offered important insight, while others felt it leaned too heavily in one direction without leaving space for response. Either way, the impact was massive. What followed was even more distance, more tension, and a deeper divide that played out on a global stage. Trust appeared harder to rebuild, and the situation became less about private family matters and more about public perception. Looking back, some now see the wedding not as a standalone celebration, but as the starting point of an ongoing, highly visible conflict. What once looked like a flawless fairy tale moment now feels, to many, like the opening chapter in a much bigger and more complicated story, one filled with drama, headlines, and a level of attention that never really faded. From the start, certain choices raised eyebrows. Loyal royal figures were reportedly pushed aside, while lesser-known celebrity faces ended up taking prime spots in the spotlight. That didn't sit right with a lot of people watching closely. Then came the food, which many described as underwhelming for such a major occasion, leaving guests expecting far more from an event of that scale. Even the photographers who were there to document history found themselves struggling just to do their jobs properly. Instead of leaning into centuries of royal tradition, the whole moment started to feel like a launchpad for something bigger. After the ceremony, things didn't exactly quiet down either. High-profile interviews, ongoing media appearances, and growing distance within the family kept the attention going strong. To critics, each move looked carefully calculated, adding more pressure to an already tense situation. Some see it as a major shift in how royal moments are handled, while others view it as a break from everything that once defined those traditions. Either way, the impact didn't fade, it only grew louder over time. If you made it this far, drop your thoughts below, because this story has layers. Make sure to like, subscribe, and share so you don't miss what comes next.